Welcome back to Tipping Point. I'm your host, Kara McKinney. Muslims are rioting across the UK because of a police shooting which happened in Bangladesh. Yeah, that's what happens when you import the third world and you castigate assimilation. You get their problems too. And giving them everything for free just reinforces the notion that they deserve something at the expense of the West. That's why we have to see this for what it is, an invasion. And if people from Bangladesh living inside the UK are allowed to show more allegiance and care about issues happening thousands of miles away in the home country they supposedly left behind, then why can't the English show any pride in their own peoples and traditions in their own homelands? You might have heard that King Charles is aiding the civilizational suicide by backing reforms in the House of Lords to take away the right of hereditary peers to serve in it. Forget the American-British divide over the aristocracy. What this shows is that families with vested interest in the survival of the British people and its traditions will be replaced and cast aside in favor of those who can be bought and sold like any politician. And what pays better these days than the destruction of the West for globalists and goals? That's why these latest rounds of elections across Europe scared the leftist globalists so bad. Centrist liberals in France literally had to jump into bed with actual commies just to stop the only anti-mass migration party from winning the projected number of seats it was expected to. The Conservatives of the UK went to defeat because their base realized they were governing like liberals instead of like conservatives. There's a populist sentiment rising in Europe against this invasion, and now the president of the European Commission is calling for the creation of a democracy shield. And what is this democracy shield, you may ask? It's supposed to be a cyber defense body of intelligence officials to counter foreign information manipulation and interference. But as my guest from earlier this week, Mike Benz, explains, quote, "The democracy shield has one purpose and one alone: to stop domestic populist groups from winning domestic elections in Europe. It will do so using a fake predicate that Russians are backing them and thus activating domestic spycraft and prosecutions of popular political adversaries," end quote. While political Islam hasn't been nearly as big a threat on this side of the pond as it is for the UK, though don't get me wrong, that's not to say that it hasn't affected us at all. We are still all too familiar, though, with the dynamic of elites shutting down free discourse in order to push forward with detrimental policies. As Benz was hinting at in that post, part of that calculus is that by taking away free speech, you also rob people of an effective tool to use in order to organize against said policies. It's one thing to talk about something, and it's quite another to actually do something. Journalist and author Abigail Shrier talks about that dynamic, but in regards to a much different topic, which may hit closer to home for many watching tonight. And that is the supposed Safety Act we talked about earlier this week after California Governor Gavin Newsom signed it into law. It prohibits schools from adopting policies requiring that teachers or other school officials inform parents about changes to gender identity or pronoun use by their child on campus. Shrier writes, quote, "The law effectively shuts down the local parents' rights movement in California by eliminating its most important tool, the ability to organize at the community level to stop schools from deceiving them. No longer can families hope to convince their school boards to require schools to notify parents that their daughter, Sophie, has been going by Sebastian in class, that her teacher, school counselor, and principal have all been celebrating Sebastian's transgender identity, that they've been letting her use the boys' bathroom and reifying the sense that she is really a boy," end quote. Joining us now to discuss is Ryan Helfenbein, the executive director of the Standing for Freedom Center. Ryan, thanks for being here tonight.
Great to be on with you, Kara.
Great. So do you think that was perhaps part of the calculations behind the scenes with this law to stymie the effectiveness that we've seen of the grassroots parents' rights movement?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, what this does is it attempts to supersede and shut out, anything that's going across districts, in the state of California. California is a huge state. 1 in 6 Americans live in the state of California. And as we've often said, and you've heard it said, as goes California, as goes the nation, right? So anything that is going to be passed, a bill that's going to be passed there, could eventually come to a district near you. I don't think it will stand constitutionally. What grounds could it stand on? The fact that children are too young to provide medical consent anyway, they're too young to vote, they're too young to drive. There is no way that AB 1955 could be constitutional when you consider everything else.